The royal palace of Zintra rose like a dream carved from moonlight and emerald glass, its spires twisting toward the twin suns that hung low over the horizon in hues of amber and violet. Built upon a floating island suspended by ancient anti-gravity cores, it drifted slowly above the misty forests of Veolora, where bioluminescent trees pulsed with soft light each night. Inside, the halls shimmered with embedded crystals that sang faintly when touched by footsteps, as if the palace itself was alive and whispering secrets. The air carried a scent like rain on metal and blooming night orchids. Clean, sharp, yet strangely warm. This was the seat of power for the Seraphine dynasty, rulers of the 12 systems of the Andar cluster, and today, it buzzed with tension masked by elegance. Guards in silver armor lined the corridors, their faces hidden behind translucent visors that flickered with data streams. Servants glided silently across polished floors, carrying trays of glowing fruits and drinks that changed color with temperature. But at the heart of it all, in the grand solarium where sunlight filtered through prismatic domes, sat Princess Lyriel. She was unlike any being Earthborn would expect to find on a throne, even an unofficial one. Her skin was the soft green of spring moss under morning dew, smooth and faintly luminous, as if tiny stars lived beneath its surface. Her hair flowed like liquid moonlight, pure white and weightless, cascading past her waist in gentle waves that seemed to move even when there was no wind. Large, almond-shaped eyes, the color of deep ocean ice, held centuries of wisdom despite her youthful face. She wore a flowing gown woven from starlight thread and living silk that shifted patterns with her emotions. One moment blooming flowers, the next rippling water. At 23 cycles old, which equated to about 30 Earth years, she was the last heir of Queen Morelia, who had died defending their people during the Shadow Rift War. Now, Lyriel bore the weight of a crumbling alliance, political schemers within her own court, and the looming threat of the Cathar Dominion, a warlike empire devouring systems on the galactic rim. And yet, for all her power and poise, she found herself utterly disarmed by the human standing awkwardly near the fountain in the center of the solarium. His name was Theo Renick, a linguist, not a warrior or diplomat, which made his presence all the more absurd. He had been part of a cultural exchange program between Earth and Zintra, intended to foster peace through understanding rather than weapons. When the delegation arrived, no one expected much from the quiet man with messy brown hair, crooked glasses, and a tendency to trip over his own feet. But Theo had spent 10 years mastering the melodic, tonal language of the Veolorians, including its poetic subdialects and ceremonial rhythms. He could recite ancient lullabies from memory and mimic bird calls used in royal courtship rituals. When he spoke, even the palace elders paused to listen. So when the High Council demanded a translator for the upcoming Unity Summit, one meant to unite fractured planetary leaders against the Cathar advance, Theo was reluctantly chosen. No one thought he'd survive a week among alien royalty. They assumed he'd be overwhelmed, possibly eaten. There were rumors some dignitaries practiced mild cannibalism as a sign of respect. Instead, he walked into the palace with a thermos of coffee, a worn notebook, and a nervous smile that somehow charmed even the most stoic guards. He hadn't planned to speak to the princess directly. That wasn't his role. But fate, it seemed, had other ideas. It happened during a private garden rehearsal. The summit's opening speech needed to be flawless, delivered in the old tongue, a near-forgotten dialect only spoken during coronations and funerals. Lyriel stood beneath a canopy of silver leaves, practicing the cadence, her voice rising and falling like wind over dunes. Theo listened from the edge of the path, correcting subtle mispronunciations in his head. Then, without thinking, he whispered, "You're stressing the third syllable too early. It should rise, like this." And he hummed the phrase gently, perfectly. Lyriel froze. Slowly, she turned. Her eyes narrowed, not in anger, but curiosity. No human has ever heard that melody spoken aloud. Not in generations. Theo flushed crimson. I read about it. In a text from the Eastern Archive. I didn't mean to interrupt." "You didn't interrupt," she said, stepping closer. "You restored it." From that moment, something shifted, not just in protocol, but in the air between them. Theo began attending rehearsals, then strategy meetings, then informal dinners where he told stories of Earth, of snow, of pizza, of dogs that barked at squirrels for no reason. Lyriel laughed more in those weeks than she had since her mother's passing. She found joy in his clumsiness, like the time he tried bowing and knocked over a ceremonial urn filled with singing moss, which, incidentally, refused to stop singing for 3 days. Or when he mistook a sentient fruit for a communication device and tried to call home with it. The palace staff adored him. The council, however, did not. Lord Varnex, the Chancellor of Internal Affairs, watched Theo with cold, reptilian eyes. Tall and angular, with grayish-purple skin and fingers that twitched when he lied, which was often. He believed humans were primitive, emotional creatures unfit for galactic politics. Worse, he saw Theo's growing closeness to Lyriel as a threat. A princess distracted by affection could make poor decisions, and poor decisions left room for ambition. Varnex wasn't loyal to the crown. He was loyal to power, and power, he believed, should rest in calculated minds, not beating hearts. One evening, as twilight painted the sky in streaks of coral and indigo, Theo stood beside Lyriel on the sky balcony, a platform extending from the palace's highest tower. Below, the island drifted over a sea of clouds, lit from beneath by the glow of Vealora's core. Stars blinked awake above. You know, Theo said, sipping lukewarm tea from a chipped mug he'd smuggled from Earth. Where I come from, we have a word for moments like this. Lyriel tilted her head. And what word is that? Sweetheart. He said it softly, almost to himself, gazing at the horizon. A silence fell. Then, impossibly, Lyriel's green cheeks darkened to a deep jade hue. Her white hair shimmered, curling slightly at the ends as if reacting to unseen energy. She looked down, then back up at him, her icy eyes wide. Say it again, she whispered. Theo blinked. What? That word. Say it again. He hesitated. It wasn't a formal title. It wasn't diplomatic. It was intimate, something lovers said in hushed voices before sleep. But the way she looked at him, with wonder and something deeper, made his chest tighten. Sweetheart, he repeated, voice barely above a breath. This time, she didn't just blush. A ripple passed through her, visible like a wave across her skin. The palace crystals nearby chimed in harmony, responding to her emotional frequency. Even the wind stilled. In Vealorian culture, such a reaction was rare, almost sacred. Certain words, when spoken with true feeling, could trigger bioluminescent responses in their nervous system. Only love, profound grief, or deep connection caused it. And it had never, in recorded history, been triggered by a foreign term from an off-worlder. Word spread quickly. By morning, the servants were giggling behind their hands. The guards exchanged knowing glances. The children of the palace began whispering sweetheart to each other just to see if they'd glow. They didn't. But Lord Varnex saw only danger. That same day, he summoned the High Command. The human influences the princess, he declared in the shadow chamber beneath the throne room. He uses emotional manipulation, a known human tactic. We must sever the connection before it weakens our position. And how do you propose we do that? Asked General Clara, a fierce warrior with armored plating along her arms and a voice like grinding stone. By proving he is unworthy, Varnex replied smoothly. By showing he is not what he seems. His plan was simple, sabotage. That night, during a ceremonial lighting of the Eternal Flame, an event attended by ambassadors from 7 worlds, Varnex planted a corrupted data crystal in Theo's quarters. The crystal contained falsified messages, forged translations that insulted key delegates, altered peace terms, and suggested Earth intended to claim Zintra as a colony. Then, he arranged for palace security to discover it during a routine scan. The accusation came like thunder. Theo Renick, boomed the chief inquisitor, standing in the grand hall before the throne. You stand accused of espionage, deception, and intent to destabilize the Zintran alliance. How do you answer? Theo stared, stunned. Around him, alien dignitaries murmured in outrage. Some clutched their ceremonial daggers. Lyriel shot to her feet, her gown blazing red with fury. This is absurd, she cried. Theo would never. My evidence is irrefutable, Varnex interrupted, holding up the crystal. Recovered from his personal terminal. Encrypted files. Lies disguised as diplomacy. Theo's mind raced. He hadn't touched a terminal in days, but the proof looked real, too real. Panic clawed at his throat. He opened his mouth to defend himself, but no words came. What could he say? That he loved poetry and coffee and the way Lyriel smiled when he told bad jokes? That he had no interest in conquest, only connection? I don't know how this happened, he stammered. I'm innocent. Innocent? Sneered a horned ambassador from Xylos. Humans are tricksters. Always have been. Lyriel stepped forward. I will vouch for him. My word as princess. Varnex bowed mockingly. Your compassion honors you, your highness. But law is law. He must face trial. Under the Star Code, That means imprisonment until verdict. The decision was sealed. Guards approached Theo. He didn't resist. As they led him away, he glanced back once. Lyriel stood tall, but her hands trembled. And in her eyes, fear, not for herself, but for him. The prison level was deep beneath the palace, carved into the island's core. Cells floated in zero gravity, surrounded by force fields that pulsed with blue energy. Prisoners were isolated, their thoughts monitored by neural dampeners. It was said no one escaped. Not ever. Theo sat on a levitating bench, staring at his reflection in the energy field. His glasses were gone. His clothes smelled of antiseptic. He felt hollow. But then, something strange happened. Late that night, the lights dimmed. The hum of the dampeners stuttered. And through the surveillance feed, a glitch appeared, a single frame of static. Then, a whisper in the darkness. Theo. He jerked upright. Who's there? A figure emerged from the shadows. Small, cloaked, face hidden. But the glow of green skin gave her away. Lyriel? Shoo! She hissed, pressing a finger to her lips. I disabled the cameras for 90 seconds. That's all I can do. What are you doing here? You'll get caught. I already am, she said, pulling back her hood. Her eyes sparkled with determination. By coming here, I've broken 3 royal edicts. But I don't care. I know you're innocent. Theo's throat tightened. Why? Why would anyone believe me? Because, she said, stepping closer. When you called me sweetheart, my soul responded. And souls don't lie. He stared at her, overwhelmed. You risked everything, for me? For truth, she corrected. And maybe, for something else. Before he could respond, alarms blared. Red lights flashed. Varnex's voice crackled over the intercom. Security breach in Sector Gamma. Princess Lyriel, return to your chambers immediately. She turned to go, then paused. Reached into her sleeve. Pulled out a small, glowing device, a data shard. This contains the real translation logs. The ones that prove your innocence. I stole them from the Central Archive. Take it. Hide it. When the time comes, use it. But how? I'm locked up. Lyriel smiled, a rare, mischievous thing. You forget. I'm not just a princess. I'm also an engineer. And I built the palace's security system when I was 12. With that, she vanished into the dark, just as guards stormed the corridor. Theo clutched the shard, heart pounding. He wasn't alone. Meanwhile, Varnex seethed in his private office, watching security feeds. He had expected Lyriel to falter, to distance herself from the human. Instead, she grew bolder, more defiant. This was not part of the plan. He tapped a command into his console. A new window opened. Encrypted. Black-screened. A distorted voice spoke. Phase 2 initiated, Varnex said. Prepare the eclipse signal. The screen flashed. Confirmed. Thar fleet en route. Arrival in 48 cycles. A slow smile crept across his face. Let the princess play hero. Let the human cling to hope. Soon, the Cthar would arrive, drawn by Varnex's secret transmission. He would save the palace by surrendering to them, positioning himself as the necessary ruler in dark times. Theo would be long forgotten, executed as a traitor. Lyriel? Exiled, perhaps. Or worse, power always found a way. Back in his cell, Theo studied the shard. It was encrypted with a quantum lock, nearly unbreakable. But then he remembered something Lyriel once mentioned. The palace's systems responded to emotional resonance. Love, sorrow, joy, they could unlock certain protocols. Could it work here? He closed his eyes. Thought of her, her laugh, her voice, the way she blushed when he said that one word. He pressed the shard to his palm and whispered, Sweetheart. A pulse of light erupted from the device. Codes unraveled. Files opened. There it was, the complete record of every translation Theo had done, all verified by neutral AI arbiters. Proof of his integrity. Proof of Varnex's lies. But there was more. Hidden in the logs was a secondary file labeled Project Eclipse. Theo accessed it. His blood ran cold. It was a full transmission log, Varnex sending coordinates and surrender codes to the Cthar. He wasn't just corrupt. He was a traitor. And the invasion was less than 2 days away. Theo had to get out. Had to warn someone. But how? Just then, the force field flickered. The lights went out completely. A voice crackled through a hidden speaker. Mechanical. Distorted. Stand back from the door. Theo barely had time to react before the energy barrier dissolved. The cell door slid open. A small drone hovered outside round with blinking purple eyes. Chirped twice. "Follow," it said in Lyriel's voice. Theo didn't hesitate. He sprinted into the corridor. The drone zipping ahead, disabling cameras and unlocking doors with precise laser pulses. Alarms wailed. Footsteps echoed in the distance. They reached a maintenance shaft, narrow, dark, crawling with coolant pipes. The drone guided him upward, through vents and service tunnels, until they emerged in a forgotten observatory, long abandoned. There waiting was Lyriel. She wore a sleek black suit lined with circuitry, her hair tied back, a holosword strapped to her side. She looked like a warrior now, sharp, focused, radiant. "You got the data," she said. "I did. Varnex is selling us out. The Kthar are coming." She nodded grimly. "I suspected. I've been monitoring his encrypted channels for weeks. But I needed proof. Now we have it. So what do? "We fight," she said simply. "But not openly. Not yet. We need allies inside the palace among the people. And we need to expose Varnex before he activates the Eclipse beacon." Theo swallowed. That could start a civil war. "Better a war for truth," she said, "than slavery in silence." They spent the next hours planning. Using Theo's knowledge of human tactics and Lyriel's mastery of Zintran tech, they devised a counter-operation. The drone, named Pipsqueak by Theo, was reprogrammed to infiltrate the central network. They would leak Varnex's treason to trusted officials, activate emergency defense protocols, and prepare the palace for siege. But they weren't fast enough. At dawn, a massive shadow blotted out the twin suns. A Kthar dreadnought, jagged, obsidian black, bristling with weapon turrets, emerged from hyperspace and hovered above the floating island. A transmission boomed across all channels. "Surrender the princess. Hand over the traitor, or we will reduce your palace to dust." Panic erupted. In the throne room, Varnex stood tall, arms raised. "People of Zintra, the time has come to choose survival over pride. We yield to the Kthar for your safety." But before he could transmit the final code, the screens flickered. Then, a new image appeared. It was Theo, standing beside Lyriel in the observatory, holding up the data shard. "People of Zintra," he said, voice steady despite his shaking hands. "My name is Theo Renick. I am not a spy. I am a friend, and I have proof that Lord Varnex has betrayed you. He invited the Kthar here. He plans to hand our world over for his own power." Gasps filled the palace. Varnex roared, "Shut it down! Kill the signal!" But it was too late. Lyriel had already broadcast the evidence, videos, audio logs, encrypted messages, to every screen, every comms unit, every citizen's wristband. The people saw the truth, and they rose. Guards turned their weapons on Varnex. Servants barricaded the council chambers. Children activated emergency drones they'd built in school workshops. The palace itself seemed to awaken, the crystals flaring gold, the gravity fields shifting to trap intruders. Outside, the Kthar fired. Energy beams slammed into the palace shields, cracking the outer dome. Explosions rocked the island. But the defenses held, for now. Lyriel grabbed Theo's hand. "We have to reach the core spire. It's the only place with enough power to send a distress call to the Allied fleet." They ran through collapsing halls, dodging debris and enemy boarding pods that crashed through windows. Pipsqueak zipped ahead, blasting small attackers with stun pulses. Theo tripped, scraped his knee, but kept going. Lyriel pulled him up, never letting go. When they reached the spire, they found it guarded by Varnex, and 4 Kthar enforcers, towering beasts in spiked armor with eyes like burning coals. "You're too late," Varnex sneered. "The beacon is already active. The fleet will destroy you all." Lyriel stepped forward, calm. "You forgot one thing." "What?" "The palace loves me." She raised her hand, touched the central console, and sang. Not a word, not a command. A melody soft, ancient, filled with sorrow and strength. The same lullaby her mother used to sing. The entire structure responded. Crystals exploded with light. Shields intensified. Gravity reversed in the chamber, lifting the Kthar off their feet. The console unlocked. Theo lunged, inserted the shard, and sent the distress signal. Above, the stars seemed to blink. Then, a miracle. Dozens of ships, silver, swift, bearing the crest of the Allied fleet, ripped through space, surrounding the dreadnought. The battle began. Inside the spire, Varnex screamed, firing a plasma pistol. Lyriel deflected it with her hollis word. Theo tackled him from the side. They rolled, grappling, until Pipsqueak delivered a shock to Varnix's neck, knocking him unconscious. Silence fell brief, precious. They stood together, panting, covered in dust and sweat. Outside, explosions lit the sky like fireworks. Lyriel turned to Theo. Her green skin glowed faintly. Her white hair swirled around her like a halo. And then, softly, she said, "Say it again." Theo didn't hesitate. "Sweetheart." This time, the entire spire lit up. Crystals rang. The very air shimmered. And somewhere, deep in the universe, a new legend began. The light that erupted from the spire didn't fade. It pulsed, like a heartbeat, syncing with the rhythm of Lyriel's breath and the steady rise and fall of Theo's chest. The crystals sang louder than ever before, their chimes weaving into Lyriel's lingering melody, as if the palace itself was celebrating. Outside, the battle raged. Flashes of energy fire streaked across the sky, warships danced in deadly spirals, and the Cthar dreadnought shuddered under relentless assault. But within the core spire, time seemed to still. Theo stood there, hand still clutching the console, heart pounding not from fear now, but from something deeper, brighter. He looked at Lyriel, really looked at her. Her eyes shimmered with unshed tears, her lips parted slightly, and her skin glowed with a soft, radiant warmth that made her appear almost divine. And yet, beneath the regal poise, he saw the girl who had once giggled at his terrible joke about space cows, who had sneaked him real food when the royal chefs kept serving nutrient-optimized essence paste, who had stayed up all night just to hear stories about Earth's oceans. She wasn't just a princess. She was his sweetheart, and she had just saved them all. "You did it," he whispered, voice rough with emotion. "You brought them here." Lyriel shook her head. "We did. You gave me the courage to fight, to believe that love isn't weakness. It's power." Outside, the dreadnought split apart in a silent explosion of blue flame, consumed by the Allied fleet's coordinated barrage. Cheers erupted across the palace comms. The threat was over for now. But the real victory hadn't been won in space. It had been won here, in this tower, in the quiet moment between two souls who had defied logic, politics, and prejudice to stand together. In the days that followed, the palace began to heal. Cracks in the domes were sealed with self-repairing crystal gel. The singing moss finally stopped belting out show tunes, much to everyone's relief. Varnix was stripped of rank and imprisoned in the same cell Theo had occupied. Though, ironically, Pipsqueak refused to visit him, claiming he gave off bad vibes. The High Council convened, shaken but resolute. With evidence of Varnix's treason undeniable and public support for Theo overwhelming, they voted unanimously to clear his name. Not only that, they offered him an official title, Ambassador of Intergalactic Harmony, with full access to diplomatic archives, cultural exchange programs, and, most importantly, unlimited coffee privileges in the Royal Pavilion. But the greatest honor came from Lyriel herself. One evening, as the twin suns dipped below the horizon and painted the clouds in gold and rose, she summoned Theo to the sky balcony, the very place where everything had begun. She wore a simpler gown tonight, woven from twilight silk, its edges glowing faintly like fireflies. In her hands, she held a small, ornate box carved from starwood. "Theo Renick," she said, her voice clear and strong. "You came into my world as a stranger. You spoke words I'd never heard with a kindness I didn't expect. You made me laugh when I thought I'd forgotten how. You stood beside me when others turned away. And you called me sweetheart." A smile tugged at his lips. "I meant it. And I," she continued, opening the box, "have a word from my people. A vow, spoken only once in a lifetime to one soul alone." She lifted a delicate circlet from the box, thin, silver, embedded with tiny crystals that pulsed in sync with her heartbeat. "This is the band of Silnara," she said. "It means, the one who completes the song. In our oldest traditions, when a Veilorian offers this, it is a promise, not of duty, not of alliance, but of love. Forever." Theo's breath caught. "You're asking me to stand with me," she finished. "Not as a diplomat, not as a guest, but as my equal, as my partner, as mine." Tears welled in his eyes. He thought of Earth, of rainy mornings, crowded subways, and lonely nights spent reading alien dialects under a dim lamp. He had spent his life searching for meaning, for connection, for a place where his voice mattered. And here, on a floating island above an alien forest, with a green-skinned princess holding out a ring made of starlight. He had found it. He took her hands. "Lyriel," he said softly, "from the moment I first saw you, I knew you were extraordinary, but I didn't know I could be part of your story. If you'll have me, I accept. 1,000 times, yes." She slipped the band onto his finger. The moment it touched his skin, the crystals flared, sending a ripple of light through the balcony. The palace chimed in harmony. Somewhere, a fountain began to glow. Pipsqueak, watching from a nearby ledge, beeped 3 times. Apparently, the universal drone signal for finally. Word spread fast, of course. By morning, children were drawing pictures of the human who won the princess's glow. Poets composed ballads about the man who spoke love in a single word. Scientists studied the bioluminescent surge recorded during the proposal, dubbing it the Renick effect, proof that emotional resonance could transcend species. Theo and Lyriel didn't care about titles or theories. They walked the gardens together, shared meals in secret nooks, and spent evenings teaching each other their languages. One phrase at a time. He taught her to say "I love you" in English. She taught him the Veilorian equivalent, a long, melodic hum that vibrated in the chest and made flowers bloom. And every night, without fail, he would whisper, "Sweetheart," just to see her blush. Years passed. The Cthar retreated, defeated and fractured. The 12 systems formed a lasting alliance, with Earth as a founding member. Peace, fragile but growing, spread across the cluster. And high above Veilora, the royal palace continued to drift, a beacon of light and song. Theo never returned to Earth permanently. He visited, of course, bringing Lyriel to meet his aging mother, who pinched his cheek and said, "So this is the alien who stole your heart? She's lovely, dear. And tall." He introduced her to pizza, snow, and the joy of napping on a couch. Lyriel, in turn, taught humans about emotional resonance, about the beauty of silence, and why sentient fruit should never be microwaved. But their home remained Zintra. When Queen Lyriel ascended the throne in a ceremony lit by 1,000 singing crystals, Theo stood beside her. Not behind her, not below her, but with her. He wore no crown, but the people called him king in spirit, beloved not for power, but for heart. Together, they ruled with wisdom and warmth. They rebuilt what was broken. They welcomed the outcast, protected the vulnerable, and reminded the galaxy that peace wasn't forged in steel, but in understanding. And late at night, when the palace slept and the stars burned bright, they would sit on the sky balcony, fingers intertwined, watching the slow dance of the cosmos. The wedding was not held in the grand throne room, nor beneath the towering spires of the palace, but in the heart of the misty forest below, the sacred glade of whispers, where ancient trees hummed with ancestral voices and the air shimmered with floating pollen that glowed like tiny stars. It was a place Lyriel had loved since childhood, where her mother once told her stories of love that spanned galaxies. She insisted on no formal ceremony, no endless rituals of state, just truth, just feeling. So on a morning when the twin suns rose in perfect alignment, painting the sky in gold and lavender, Theo stood barefoot on the mossy ground, wearing a simple suit woven from earth cotton and Veilorian light thread. He fidgeted with his collar, still not used to dressing up, until Pipsqueak zipped down and gently headbutted his hand in reassurance. Then the music began, not from instruments but from the forest itself. Birds sang in harmonic cycles. The wind passed through crystal leaves, creating soft chimes. And from between the towering trunks, she appeared. Lyriel wore a gown made of living vines threaded with star blooms, their petals shifting color with her heartbeat. Her white hair flowed loose, crowned with a wreath of silver fireflies that had chosen to join the celebration of their own will. Her green skin glowed faintly, as it always did when she was happy, truly happy. She walked slowly, eyes locked on Theo's. No guards, no council, just them, and the few who mattered, Theo's mother, flown in with tears already streaming, General Clara, standing stoic but with a rare smile, the palace cooks, who had spent weeks perfecting Earth-style cake, and Pipsqueak, now upgraded with ceremonial sparkles and the official title of Best Drone. When Lyriel reached Theo, he didn't speak. He simply took her hands, warm and steady, and whispered the only words that had ever truly mattered. "Sweetheart," and the entire glade blushed. The trees pulsed green. The flowers bloomed brighter. Even the sky seemed to soften, clouds parting as if the universe itself bowed to their love. They exchanged vows in both English and the old tongue, promises not of eternal rule, but of eternal presence, of laughter in quiet moments, of holding each other during storms, of teaching their children that kindness was the greatest strength of all. When they kissed, the forest erupted in song. From that day on, their life together unfolded like a dream written in starlight. They returned to the palace not as diplomat and princess, but as husband and wife, King Consort Theo and Queen Lyriel, co-rulers of Zintra, beloved by their people. Their chambers were filled with books from Earth and glowing scrolls from Veolora. Mismatched furniture, Theo insisted on a hammock, and walls covered in drawings made by little hands. Because yes, they had children. Not one or two, but a joyful, chaotic, brilliant many. Their firstborn, Lyra, inherited her mother's luminous green skin and her father's messy brown curls. She could hum in 3 dialects by age 2 and once calmed a diplomatic crisis by singing a lullaby. Then came Kalen, a boy with white hair and bright blue eyes who built robots out of breakfast leftovers and claimed his best friend was Pipsqueak's great-great-grandrone. After that came twins, Mira and Sen, born during a solar storm so powerful the palace floated 10 miles higher for a week. Mira spoke before she crawled and demanded coffee at age 4. Decaf after a very serious talk. Sen never cried, but whenever he was upset, tiny flowers sprouted from the floor around him, a trait he'd inherited from his mother's emotional resonance. And then, when everyone said, surely that's enough, came little Elian, smallest of them all, with pale green skin and Theo's crooked glasses, magnetically attached, because he kept losing them. He was born laughing, which startled the royal midwives, and by 6 months had mastered telepathic giggling. Their home was never quiet. There were spilled gravity jelly fights, accidental teleportation mishaps. Lyra once sent the royal banquet into orbit, and bedtime stories that lasted half the night because someone always had one more question. But there was also warmth, endless hugs, pancake mornings, stargazing from the rooftop, and every evening, without fail, Theo would gather the children around and tell them the story of how he called their mother sweetheart and changed the galaxy. Lyriel watched these moments with a full heart. She ruled with wisdom, led with courage, and defended her people fiercely. But her greatest pride was not in palaces or power, but in the sound of her children's laughter echoing through the halls. Years melted into decades. Theo's hair turned gray, then silver, but his smile never faded. His steps slowed, but his voice remained strong, especially when he whispered that one word to his wife under the stars. And Lyriel? She aged differently. Veolorians lived longer, their bodies changing slowly, gracefully. Her hair stayed moon-white, her eyes still ocean-bright. But when she looked at Theo, the glow in her skin deepened, just as it had on the first day. When their grandchildren arrived, curious, bold, half-human and half-Veolorian wonders with glowing freckles and accents that mixed Earth slang with galactic poetry. The palace became louder, brighter, more alive than ever. One evening, long after their reign had become legend, Theo and Lyriel sat once more on the sky balcony, wrapped in a shared blanket woven from comet silk. Their children played below, chasing fireflies with the little ones. Pipsqueak, now running on 300-year-old backup batteries and sheer stubbornness, hovered nearby, softly humming their wedding song. Theo leaned his head against hers. You know, I still can't believe you picked me. Lyriel turned, smiling, her fingers tracing his wrinkled palm. I didn't pick you, my love. The universe did. It heard one small word, sweetheart, and said, at last, they've found each other. He chuckled. Best mistake I ever made, calling you that. It wasn't a mistake, she said, resting her forehead against his. It was a beginning.